So welcome to EnviroSchool. This is our April session, looking at composting, food waste, and how you can make a difference in reducing and preventing food waste, and how you can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help protect our environment. So thank you for joining us at this EnviroSchool. We're really excited to have you. Uh, for those of us who are new, not those of us, those of you who are new to EGLE and maybe don't know exactly what we do, we are a regulatory agency at the state of Michigan whose mission is to protect the environment and public health by managing air, water, land, and energy resources. We do that by limitation of pollutants, by inspections of facilities and enforcement of regulations, which is probably the thing that most people know us for. We investigate spills and emergencies uh, that happen throughout the state to make sure that the environment is being protected and human health is being protected. We also do a lot of monitoring of air quality, land use, water quality, and lots of outreach, technical assistance, and really financial assistance. A huge amount of our budget is actually pass-through money to communities and organizations to do the work that's needed on the ground to protect the environment. Our organization, you probably don't care too much about our org chart, but our organization is broken up into 6 what we call program divisions. And these are our divisions that look at air, land, water, drinking water, materials management, redevelopment of contaminated sites, oil, gas, and minerals. And then we have some of these higher level offices that look at policy and statewide strategy. And then we have support services, which includes things like environmental support division, which is where I'm housed, doing environmental education. So in the past EnviroSchool sessions, we have covered basically all of our program divisions except for air quality, which we are hitting next month with our May EnviroSchool session. So come back for that. And today we're honing in on another component of the materials management division, which does a wide variety of things, including looking at waste management and trash. So if you looked at our Talking Trash webinar back in December, you might recognize one of our speakers today from that. If you heard from our energy and sustainability webinar in February, that was in that division as well. So a lot of different things happen in EGLE, and we're excited that you're here to learn more about what we do, and we want to help you understand what we do so that you can teach about the environment more effectively with your audiences. And that's what this series is really about, is bringing resources to you as educators to help teach about the environment, helping you create connections between yourself and maybe your students, and then professionals in this field, maybe help them get aware of more careers and more resources that they can use to learn and to help advance our mission of protecting the environment and public health. So today our wonderful presenters are here to talk to you about preventing food waste and then composting what you do end up not using. So we have Aaron Hyde here today. He is our compost program coordinator. And we have Tracy Piranhage is back with us to talk about more trash. She's one of our recycling specialists here at EGLE. So with that, I am going to hand the baton over to Tracy to get us started talking about our content for today.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
You sound great.
Awesome, thanks. I just realized that Aaron's picture is much nicer than mine. He's got this like nice action shot and I don't, so kudos
You have to
to
invite
Aaron.
me out in the field to
I
follow
know.
you around. That's how I
Yeah.
got Aaron's picture.
All right, well, that's going to be on my to-do list, like top of my to-do list. So I am, and you can see my slides, okay, right? So
Yes,
Eileen?
looks great.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I am Tracy Pernhage. Although I did get the like, I'm back. So there, Aaron, like, although you did another one, right? I'm trying to like beat Aaron in something here. So, so I'm Tracy Pernhage. I'm a recycling specialist with EGLE in the recycling unit. I share that responsibility with another recycling specialist, Jeff Kirchmerich, and we split the state right now to provide outreach and education, grant management, and technical assistance with the goal of increasing access to recycling and increasing participation and helping communities improve and implement recycling and food waste diversion programs and things like that. Today, Erin asked me to join him in talking about food waste and composting, so I am going to do the food waste part of this discussion, and then he's going to talk all about the composting and all the technical stuff that I can't help you with. So we're going to start off by just talking about food waste. And I'm sorry if I'm kind of like looking off to the side, but I have my screen with my PowerPoint just off to the side of me. So first of all, we're going to talk about food waste. And food waste is a wicked problem. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the definition or the term wicked problem before. I was talking to someone yesterday about a wicked problem, and they've never heard that term before. So food waste is a wicked problem. It's really just a complex social, environmental, economic problem. That means that there's not really a simple solution for it. It means that it takes a wide variety of solutions to come up with, takes a wide variety of solutions really to solve the problem, right? And it means that there's a lot of players that have to be involved in solving that problem. For food waste, it's crucial that all stakeholders that are involved in the food chain, for this particular instance, from production, distribution, hospitality, and food service sectors, and including families and individuals, need to cooperate in building solutions. So that's how we define a wicked problem for food waste. So how much food waste is there? This is a diagram from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And in this diagram, this is actually on the EGLE website in the composting and food waste page. So this one describes food waste as being about 21% of our waste stream. This is an overall estimate for the US. If you get to talking about the state of Michigan, it's a little bit different. So food waste makes up in this one about 21% of our waste stream overall in the US, with yard waste being about another 8%. So organics, we usually use the term organics material for food waste and yard waste. But when we look at the state of Michigan, we see that material is a little bit more. We use 38% for organics and compostables. When we're talking about food waste, there's a lot of different numbers out there. Overall, we're hearing about a third of what we're throwing away is food waste. Across the country, across the world, the number is about somewhere around a third or 33% of what we're throwing in our trash and landfills is food waste. So whether you're at 21%, 33%, 29%, whatever that number is, it's a significant portion of what we're finding in our landfills. So why is food waste an issue? These are some of the reasons that it's a pretty significant issue. Food loss and food waste adds to carbon dioxide emissions from all of the production, the transportation, and the handling of food. Every pound of food waste thrown away results in about 3.8 pounds of methane gas released into our environment. So the thing about this is that when food waste is thrown away into a landfill, the open space of a landfill, when that material is decomposing, the methane is released into the environment. Methane is not captured in a landfill until the landfill is sealed. So anything that's decomposing and releasing methane gas is going out into the environment. So every pound of food waste is resulting in 3.8 pounds of methane gas, which is pretty significant. Methane gas is one of the most concentrated greenhouse gas emitters that there is. So that's a pretty significant number and a pretty significant thing that we need to pay attention to. So again, food waste is a lot of material going to the landfill that really doesn't need to be in a landfill, that there's higher and better uses for. When we waste food, we're wasting all of the natural resources that go into the production of that food, to grow that food, to harvest it, to package it. and to transport it. So all the natural resources, the energy, the water, the land, the soil, all of that material is wasted when we're wasting food. Again, I mentioned just a minute ago that, there's a higher and better use for unused food. We have lots of people across the nation, across the world that are with, that have food insecurity, that are going without food. Food, when we compost it, food waste can be turned into soil, can be composted, turned into soil and used as a soil amendment. Aaron is going to talk a lot about that in his part. And then the lost economic value worldwide. The food that we waste is equaling about $1 trillion a year, and that amount of food could also feed about 3 billion people on a worldwide scale. So it's a pretty significant issue. Food waste is also found and addressed in the My Healthy Climate plan that Michigan has. So it's a significant issue that we need to pay attention to. If global food waste was a country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter after China and the US. So here's a little measure of greenhouse gas emissions: China, US, and then if food waste was a country, there it would be. So I didn't get a chance to change this. Aaron and I were chatting back and forth on our Teams chat, and and I know there's somebody on here that's going to yell at me for this, but so what's the solution? When we look at food waste, and I mentioned earlier to start that food waste is a wicked problem and that it needs all of the players to help figure out what the solution is. And so being a wicked problem, we can get easily overwhelmed on how to solve this problem, right? So we talk about the producers and the farmers and the transporters and the food service providers and everyone in between. And so the thing that we don't want to do is get overwhelmed on how we solve this problem, because we can only affect so much change. And so what we really need to do is think about where our piece of the puzzle is and what we can affect. And so that's what we need to do, is not get overwhelmed and just think about where we are and what we can do and what our impact can be and where we can affect the change. And so that's what we really want to focus on today, is where we affect that change. So I don't want you to get overwhelmed. I want you to think about and focus on where we have that impact as an individual, and you as teachers or educators, formal or non-formal, what you can do as an individual, in your family, in your classroom, in your school district, or with the non-formal education that you do. This is the state of Michigan, EGLE's food waste hierarchy. It mirrors the materials management hierarchy that you see for the EPA, that you see for EGLE. Sustainable food management, again, like I said, it mirrors that reduce, reuse, recycle philosophy. We waste less. How do you do that? You purchase less. You put on your plate only what you need. You take only what you need. You feed people first. You donate extra to those who need it. You feed animals after you feed people. What can't be fed to people, you can feed animals as animal feed. You create energy with what is left over. I think Aaron is going to touch a little bit on anaerobic digesters, or maybe he can if he wasn't planning on that. That's one of the ways that you can create energy from food waste. Aaron's going to talk about composting, so using food waste as an additive to compost and building healthy soils from the material. And then the last option is then to landfill it, which is, again, obviously what we don't want to do, because food waste is one of those organic materials that can turn back into soil. So these are, the options of what we can do with food waste. This is Food Waste Prevention Week. We are kind of right in the middle of it, or kind of nearing the end of it. The state of Michigan has taken part. This is the second year that we've taken part in this kind of this movement. It kind of started a few years ago with California, moved to Florida, a bunch of other states kind of joined on. The beginning of April, I think there's now 500 partners nationwide and across the world that have joined this movement. Food Waste Prevention Week. I think Eileen probably is going to send out the slides, or she can put links, I think, in the chat. So to Food Waste Prevention Week, and then also with this link, there's resources for educators, different kind of curriculum activities and things like that, that you can participate in and that you can do with your students, or with other ones that you're teaching and reaching out to. This is a really great movement that has taken a hold and is really awesome, just on education and awareness about how much food we're wasting, how much food, the cost of food, the natural resources that we're wasting, and other things that we can be doing with it. The state of Michigan, like I said, has taken participation in this in the last 2 years. Sorry about the blurry image here. If you go to our website, there's a Food Hero Pledge where you can take this pledge and commit to also reducing food waste. And by taking this pledge, you're agreeing to reduce food waste, you're saving money, you're reducing hunger, and you're protecting our environment by doing all of those things. Again, going back to that, talking about that wicked problem and the things that food waste, by wasting food, what we're doing is, again, we're wasting resources, we're wasting money, and we're people are going hungry by not using all of the food that we're wasting. So it's awesome that I'm excited that the state of Michigan joined on into this movement. So it's a really good step for the state of Michigan. And like I said, food waste is an issue that's taken up in the My Healthy Climate Plan. So what and how much? So I guess we're going to start talking about, and leading into kind of Erin's part, we're going to start talking about what you as educators can do in your schools with your students, and talking about what and how much food waste is in your school. And so this is starting to talk about, the actions that you can take in with your students, and learning about, what you can do, why it's important, and teaching them, really getting them to know how much they're wasting, right? Because a lot of times we don't really see that, we don't really understand it. We throw things out and we really don't realize what we're throwing out until it's kind of brought up in front of us. And the one way to do that is with a food waste audit. So this is really just a process to identify the types and the quantities of food waste that we generate. You can do this, you can just do a regular audit. This is specifically for a food waste audit. And with a food waste audit, we're actually collecting, measuring, and recording the food waste data. So the reason that we do this is you can't manage what we don't measure, and you can't see progress without the measurement. So in order to figure out how we want to manage your food waste, again, whether this is in your home, whether this is in your school, or whether this is going to be in your school district, you want to measure initially what you have, the types of material, the types of food that you have, the quantities that you have, and then move on to seeing, implementing changes and seeing the progress of the changes that you implement. So what you're hoping to get the outcomes from the food waste audit that you implement is you're going to learn what kinds of foods go uneaten by your students. You're going to gather data from the audit that's going to help you develop the strategies to reduce food waste and wasted food. So those are two different kinds of things. And then you're going to, the audit is going to help you identify why the students are throwing away the foods that they are, and help you to develop the strategies to combat this. So those are going to be some of the outcomes from the food waste audit. So in terms of best practices, and we're going to do this kind of at a high level, we could talk, we could do a webinar just on how to implement a food waste audit. So these are just high level best practices, and Erin, you can jump in and add to this as we talk through this. But again, this is just high level. There's a lot that goes into it. There are resources available for how you actually do an audit. I think we have some resources for you. EPA does. Lots of other, really detailed information, forms, measurement tools, things like that, what you need to actually implement it. But this is, again, just kind of an overview of how you do it. So best practices in a food waste audit for your school, a facility, whatever it may be. You want to start with planning an audit. You want to assemble a team, make sure that you have volunteers. When you have a team for starting an audit, for starting a green team, a green school team, any of that kind of stuff, you're going to want to make sure that that team is representative of the administration, of your parents, of your janitorial staff, and kind of encompassing of everybody that represents your school or your school district, whatever level you're doing this at. If you're going to just do it at a school level, you're going to want to make sure, obviously, that your administration is involved, that your food service, provider is involved, that your janitorial staff is involved, that that you have a representative from your parent-teacher organization, that you have your students represented, and so forth. You're going to, with that team, you're going to talk about, what the purpose is of your food waste audit, why you want to do it, and so forth. You're going to talk about, when you're going to do this audit. We always suggest that you do it on multiple days, so that you have varying degrees of data. And you also select days that that your cafeteria is serving different foods. So you always take, the favorite food day, if it's pizza day or burger day or whatever that, that favorite food day is, and then another day or two, but making sure that it's, that the cafeteria is serving a different type of food, and make sure that those are different days and different days of the week. You set up, audit stations. There's always, checklists of making sure that you have the proper, PPE, the proper types of equipment and containers and scales and things like that, pads of paper and measurement, your measurement tools and all of those kinds of things. So there's a whole list of things that you will need. But set up your audit station. You're going to want to make sure you remove your trash cans so that, when it comes time for the audit, that the students are actually, have to go to your station and take all of their food to a certain station so that you and your volunteers can actually sort all of the waste, all of the food waste that's being generated. When I've done them before, we don't tell anybody that we're doing the audit. Like, the students don't know until the day of. You really do this, and we do the same thing with any other waste audit. We don't want anyone to change any of their behavior with an audit. So that's why we don't tell anybody. I mean, obviously, your planning team and your volunteers know, but we don't tell the students that we're doing it, because we don't want anyone to change their behavior. We want all of the behavior to be the exact same. So it's not something that we publicize. We kind of keep it on the, on the down low, so that no one's doing anything different that day, except that when they go to clear their trays, that their trays are coming to the audit station and instead of going to the garbage can. At the audit station, you're going to sort foods, your foods, liquids, and other containers by pre-established types. And so you're going to determine that, ahead of time. And we have some pictures to show you of how those audits have been, how they have been set up before, and how we've sorted food and containers in previous audits. After the sort, you're going to, collect your data. You're going to measure each of the containers by weight and volume, and collect all of that data so that you have that. And then you're going to do your calculations afterwards and come up with information that you can use to determine, kind of your next steps and what you found, how much, fruit was uneaten, and, how much was there by weight and volume and stuff like that. But also you can visually see, and you can see from some of the pictures I'm about to show you, you can also glean other information from what you're seeing in these pictures. So, and I so bad want to ask questions. I'm so used to that when I'm presenting, but obviously we can't do that right now. But so these are some of the pictures, and these are from Aaron and some of the audits he has done. But same thing in my experience, you know, when you're sorting, you're going to obviously too, you're going to have in these audits, they had styrofoam trays, disposable utensils and things like that. So, but in these audits, you can see that there are unopened milks, unopened, looks like, you know, applesauce or something like that, uneaten fruit. So, you know, so these are things also just to keep, you can kind of take notes on the things that were unopened and why, you know, you can ask questions of the students as they're dropping these things off, why they didn't open their milk, why they didn't drink it, why they didn't eat their apple, things like that. And I would suggest that you do that because it would also provide information on, you know, things that can be done differently, strategies to use in the future to help guide, you know, how you can reduce food waste going forward. So, and so one of these, the picture on the bottom, on my bottom left, if that should be the same thing that you're looking at, these volunteers are sorting, you know, into these different 5-gallon buckets, you know, different types of food, whether they're fruit, you know, meats, whatever it is. They're also in the top left, they're emptying milk containers, liquids, and then also keeping the containers, the cartons, so they could, you know, be recycled. So, and then measuring what could be recycled that would otherwise have gone in the trash. And then these are just some additional pictures after the sort. So you can see the milk containers with milk still in them would have gone to the trash. Otherwise, these could have been recycled. The bucket of apples, bread, the container with the emptied milk, wrappings from straws and things like that. And then so with an audit, each of these would be weighed. And then you could also jot notes down about how, you know, the weight of these, but then also how full your containers were, just to make any, you know, any and all references to weight, volume, and things like that. So you have that information going forward. And then just more pictures. Before we do that, Erin, do you want to jump on and talk, give any input on the audits?
Yeah, so planning, right, is your biggest friend. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, good, because my other headphones, battery died on me while you were talking. I had to go find my regular headphones. So planning is your friend. Having enough bodies to get done efficiently what you need to get done. And then, you know, as Eileen said, doing different days is crucial. So in the audit that was in those photos, we actually went on a Monday, we went on a Wednesday because that was Monday. There was more food waste on Wednesday because that particular school had a schedule where every Wednesday the kids came in later. And because the school was on free and reduced lunches, they also got breakfast. So these kids were getting dry goods breakfast, being Pop-Tarts, granola bars, things like that. And then an hour later, heading to lunch. And we're talking K through 4 in this school. And, you know, that burger that's uneaten on that plate, I believe that picture actually is from Wednesday, totally untouched. And honestly, that burger was bigger than the little boy's head who didn't eat it. And so it's one of those things where a food waste audit will help you start to see flaws in your system. So whether you're purchasing too much food or you recognize, hey, you know, on Wednesdays, because there's such a, you know, in this particular case, on Wednesdays, because there's such a short time span between breakfast and lunch, maybe we don't serve as much for lunch. Now I understand that for a lot of you who are educators who are hearing that saying, but we have to meet certain requirements because of the free and reduced lunch funding. I understand that, and in some cases the system is rigged against you a little bit. But what I would offer you is say, look into offer versus serve, because in a lot of cases, as long as you are offering things, you can still get the funding. You don't have to make the children take everything. So that's something to look into. I'm not going to go into it because I'm not an expert on that part of it, but I would definitely look into that as well. And then the one thing that's not in these photos was a scale. I just had a little scale I bought on Amazon, and we weighed everything. And we took lots of photos, and we made sure that because we were the ones conducting the audit, we made sure that we brought all the staff that Tracy mentioned into the cafeteria to put eyes on, like, this is the amount of food waste that you guys are producing. And we did that both days, and they were pretty astonished at how much food waste was coming out of that lunchroom on a daily basis. The other thing too that I would say is, if you're going to conduct it in-house, doing more than 2 days and spanning like over the course of a couple of weeks to try and get a very average number of, like, this is how many pounds of food waste we're producing each day is best. Don't do them 2 days in a row. And like Tracy said, don't alert ahead of time. Just get your crew, go in there and do it, because you want everything to be as natural as possible. So,
yeah. I would just, before Erin starts talking about, about the end product and what you do with the food waste, the options for food waste disposal and management, I would just say too that, during this audit, take lots of pictures, take lots of notes, and lots of pictures, because I think one of the best things after this audit is to show these pictures and to do a presentation and education to the students that don't get to see this, and let them, show them these pictures, right? Because it's always eye-opening for your students to see the quantities of milk, of apples, of burgers, of whatever that are going in the trash. When they see these piled up, it's really eye-opening for them to see that, one at a time. When they do it one at a time, throwing it away, it doesn't really resonate. But when they see a stack of it or a bucket full of apples, especially, a bite out of each one, a bunch of them uneaten, and then knowing that they're going in the trash, really, really kind of resonates and makes an impact, especially when you show them that and compare it to the fact that it costs money and, resources cost money and things like that. So, I would highly recommend lots of pictures. Or even, if there's an opportunity that while this is going on, to bring some of your students through here to be able to see it in person happening, if that's an option to arrange. I know that's a little bit difficult to coordinate, but any of that opportunity for education and engagement with the students to see this firsthand is really important. So I am going to stop and let Erin take over. So.
And actually, Tracy, I'm going to have you advance slides for me.
Sure.
We'll just keep this simple. That way we don't have to break off and have me try and take over.
Sure.
Okay, so, the first part of reduce, reuse, recycle is reduce, right? That's what Tracy's been talking about. And doing the food waste audit, figuring out how to reduce your waste on the front end. However, when those kids do take just a single bite out of the apple and then toss it, there's not really much you can do about saving that apple. Once it's been bitten into, it's going to end up being waste. So if you're looking to have some sort of a solution on the back end, composting, and I'll talk a little bit about anaerobic digestion a little bit later, but a lot of you probably won't ever interact with it. So I'm going to stick with composting. This is your solution on the back end. right? What is composting? Well, simply put, controlled decomposition of organic materials. Composting, though, turns that material back into something that is going to be beneficial to plant growth. So next slide, please. So why does composting occur? Well, bacteria are breaking down organic materials at the molecular level. Things that we can't see, billions of them, are slowly eating away at it and producing waste, and that's how soil is created. So composting, though, will only occur when you have live, active bacteria, okay, good bacteria, because there are bad bacteria, and that's where foul odors come from. But true composting really shouldn't smell that much. When you have live, active bacteria in a compost pile, that's when you get good composting. So if you take care of bacteria, they'll take care of you. Next slide, please. So that's what composting is. Why is it important? Going back to where Tracy started a lot of part of her presentation is diverting away from landfills. Food waste is about 30% of the total waste stream. I believe our graphic there had 21%. I think it's a little higher than that. And then we know here in Michigan, we're a little higher than that. And all of that will generate methane in a landfill unless it's capturing, which many of them do not capture methane. So that's a very potent greenhouse gas, makes climate change that much worse. So we need to divert it away from the landfills. But beyond that, composting will actually rejuvenate soil. So synthetic fertilizers are not actually good at creating a living soil. A lot of modern agriculture depends so much on synthetic fertilizers, and they don't realize that their soil is actually dying. And the more that it dies, the more dependent they become on synthetic fertilizers to make the plants grow. So compost is important because a living, active soil will actually sequester carbon from the atmosphere, meaning it will take carbon out of the atmosphere and put it back into the soil where it was supposed to be in the first place. So we can actually help reduce carbon and help climate change through composting. And then just going back to the whole agriculture part of it, you get a lot of better water retention in soils that are alive, in soils that have been used, where compost has been used. So it's one of those things where you can also get better yields because compost is better with nutrients and better water retention, so you're using less water. So now we're talking about actually reducing the amount of components that have to go into generating food in the first place. So composting is this sort of one-size-fits-all solution to a lot of issues that we have surrounding food waste. Again, reducing it in the first place is best, but when you do create it, compost is the way to go. Okay, next slide, please. So how do we compost? And I hope this presentation's been shortened down from a longer one, and I hope this doesn't feel a little too scatterbrained, but I'm gonna go through this quickly. So we have two ways. We have the passive way and the active way. So the passive way, as this gentleman in our little triangle here is showing us, is very easy to do. Basically, you just have a bin or an area and you put organic materials, leaves, grass, food waste in and let it sit. And eventually it will turn back into soil because bacteria will do what they do. Next slide, please. But there are some issues with composting. It's easy, yes, but it's not gonna have a lot of heat involved. So if you're throwing grass, your yard clippings, things like that in there, you're gonna have weeds. And if you have weed seeds, they're not gonna die, which means that when you go to spread the weeds or the compost back out, those weed seeds are gonna germinate. So you can actually create more of a problem than what you started with. And then also things take a lot longer to break down. And if you're adding any sort of food waste, it can attract critters like our recycling raccoons here. And then just in general, it takes a lot longer to produce a finished product. And I would say roughly, if you're doing passive composting, it's going to take you roughly at least 18 months to 2 years to have a soil that you, or a beneficial product that you can use and put back into your soil. Next slide, please. Then we have active composting. And I'm a geologist by education, so I couldn't help but put a picture of an active volcano here. But compost is actually very similar. You have, if you're actively composting, you have a heat source that will vent off a lot of water vapor because organics are inherently wet in a lot of cases. There's water trapped inside of them. You know, we're like, what, 80 or 90 some percent water ourselves. You know, put you in a compost pile, you would vent off a lot of steam. Next slide, please. So it's much shorter way to compost, but it has some issues as well because it's much more labor intensive. Even though it's going to build up the heat and kill off weed seeds, kill off salmonella from food waste, things like that, you have to put a lot more love into it. So you have to put a lot more time into turning it and flipping it and making sure that there's plenty of oxygen. And once you start actively composting, and passive composting can have this issue too, but if you start actively composting and then let it go, it can go anaerobic and create a foul odor. And that foul odor can attract critters like our recycling raccoons here. And it is quicker though, but you have to watch the temperature because if you're actively composting, you could technically get spontaneous combustion, meaning it catch fire. That isn't likely to happen in a small pile, but some folks, I think I saw Lindsay Walker from Emmett County Recycling join this call a few minutes ago. She's got a large compost facility. She has to take temperatures, you know, every week to make sure that her large compost piles don't catch fire. So on the small level, probably not going to happen, but it is something that you have to think about. So if you do active composting, you have to at least have like a little meat thermometer that you can stick in there and get the temperature off of it. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do at a school for composting? There's a lot of things that you can do, but it's really going to come down to a couple of things. And Tracy, next slide, please. And the first thing you need to do is ask yourself, why are we doing this? If you're thinking about composting at your school, why are we doing it? If you're looking to just do a teaching tool, something about composting, you know, hey, I want to teach the kids, this is how organic materials break back down in the soil, that's very easy to do, low maintenance. You can even pull out some of the food waste from the cafeteria to say, hey, you know, just to teach, like, this is what you should do with your food waste. You know, go home and teach your parents this, you know, take your stuff off your plate and that you're not going to eat, put it in the compost pile, turn it back into a beneficial product, which is compost. But if you're thinking like, no, we really want to try and reduce waste in our cafeteria. We've done everything we can on the front end, but we still have a lot of waste. We're a large school. Then you really are going to have to think about potentially some other options, meaning you're going to have to either invest in equipment and people, or you're going to have to invest in a third-party hauler. And I'm going to get to that later. So real quick though, you know, why are we doing this? Well, you're looking to reduce some food waste, have a teaching tool. You can do just a small bin system, and I'm going to talk about that. But you can use that finished material in flower beds, you know, general landscaping. It's okay to utilize a passive composting method, right? You want a bunch of worms to get in there and be able for the kids to pick them up, stuff like that. Basic care for the compost pile. But if you're looking to utilize your finished compost in a school garden, which there are schools that are doing this, one of the first things that I would ask you is this a garden where vegetables are going to be grown for human consumption? Because if that is the case, you need to consider not adding food waste to your compost, because there are potential health concerns about salmonella, and there's health safety concerns that are actually regulations by Department of Ag through food safety programs. And I actually sit on a group with Michigan Department of Education and MDARD folks. There's a food safety group, and that's one of the things that we always are concerned about when schools do composting. You got to do it right. So you have to do active composting. You have to record your temperatures. You have to show that you've reached 131 degrees in your compost pile for at least 15 days. And depending on the types of food that you're putting in, you may actually have to show that you've reached like 150 degrees at some point throughout your composting cycle before that compost could be utilized back in something like a school garden. Next slide, please. So just real quick, we've got, this is from this is a graphic from a little guide that we have printed up, and you can find it online. These are very basic composting bins. So you got a snow fence bin, woven wire bin, and a block or brick bin. I make mine from pallets here at my house. These are very easy to make, and especially if you're just looking to do like a, this is a teaching tool. These are very easy, cheap ways, and you can even get the students involved in making the bins and then turning, into a compost system. Next slide, please. So what do you add to your compost pile? Well, you can add leaves, grass, garden plants, non-invasive weeds. If you're active composting, I would say no weeds if you're going to do passive. Small brush, twigs, some of, you need carbon materials. You can do some wood ash and some other stuff, even some food waste, coffee grounds. But you don't want to add pieces of logs, things that are too big to break down in a small system. You don't want to put pet or human waste in, charcoal or cat ash, sawdust from treated wood. And we usually say stay away from meat or dairy food items, because if you're not going to be out there every day turning it, things like that, or at least every week, that's where the recycling raccoons like to come and check to see what you're doing, because they can be quite the feast for them. Next slide, please. And this is just an example, and go ahead and go to the next slide real quick, Tracy. These are just basic examples of, and I pulled these from the internet, but if you're looking at doing composting or any sort of food separation for any reason at your school, post-consumer, so child, basically, you need to have an education campaign. These kids aren't just going to intuitively pick it up. You got to put things up like signage like this. You probably need somebody for a while, explaining, no, don't put that in there. That goes in this bucket and things like that. So you got to commit to it if you're going to do any sort of sorting. Next slide, please. So what would something look like if you want to go ahead and actually skip 2 slides? So this is my home compost bin, and I forgot I was going to take this slide out. Go ahead and go to the next one real quick. So this is just a bunch of pallets that I screwed together. Tried to make them look a little nice for my wife, but it's been a few years. It's seen its better days. But basically, I have 3 bins, and what you do, this is very simple. I go out with a pitchfork. I actually do active composting, but I have a pitchfork. I go out and I just flip from one bin to the next one. And I do this over the course of several months. By the time that it goes from the first bin to the third bin, in about, I would say 9 months-ish, I have a compost that's pretty much ready to use in my garden. It's still pretty alive, and I'll leave it there over winter to cure. But it doesn't take me terribly long, even in just a backyard system. Next slide, please. This is just a real quick picture of, the active pile, and I wish it showed up better, but there's actually steam coming off of the pile the day that I took this. It was 100, and I think that day, if I remember correctly, when I did this, because it was for a different presentation, it was like 142 degrees, and this was in February, a few years back. Next slide, please. And then this is the my finished pile. It still needs some time to cure, but there were a lot of worms in it, and I let them sort of finish what I started. And this sort of a system, when you're doing this is just a teaching tool. We want to teach the kids about compost. This is the way to go. Make a several bay system that you can say, hey, here's a pitchfork, here's a potato fork, here's some shovels. kids go at it, and then while you're turning stuff, you're pulling out worms, you're pulling out some of the bugs, you're teaching them about everything that's going on in the ecosystem that's basically created by the compost pile. It's a great teaching tool. Next slide, please. But if you are looking to actually reduce a certain percentage or all of your food waste, you're gonna have to beef things up, which means you're gonna have to dedicate space, you're gonna have to dedicate people, and you're gonna have to get equipment. So this is a small composting system, and honestly, this system probably wouldn't even be big enough for a normal size elementary, middle school. But if you're thinking of doing something on site, you're gonna have to get into it and have the adequate options to handle it. And you're also gonna have to have enough carbon material. So if you think of everything in buckets, for every bucket of food waste you put in, you gotta put in 3 to 4 buckets of leaves or wood chips or sawdust, because otherwise it won't compost correctly. So it's a big commitment. Next slide, please. But there are some other options. This is a pre-made sort of set it and forget it type of a composting system, but it's a lot less labor intensive. You mix materials into it, you press a button, it does its thing. However, this is not cheap. So again, if you're really looking to reduce your food waste, and you have to go on the back end because you've done everything that Tracy was talking about on the front end, you're going to have to commit. So you're either going to have to spend the money or you're going to have to put the labor into it, time and effort. And but when you create a finished compost on your school grounds, maybe your landscapers don't have to buy fertilizer, right? Because you're able to use the compost on site. There's a lot of things that can be done with the compost, and there's a lot of ways to go about it. I'm not going to go. I could talk for 2 hours about everything that you could do, but honestly, most of you, if you're looking to really make an impact on your food waste at your school, you're going to have to go with another option, and that's the next section. So let's go forward, Tracy. So are there other options? The answer is yes, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So My Green Michigan is a third-party organics waste hauler. So if you think of Waste Management, Republic Services, Granger, whoever you might happen to have in your area, they come every week, they pick up your trash. This is exactly the same thing, except it is organics only. Now, that could still be brown paper towels and things like that. They will take everything because they've got the connections to either go to registered compost facilities, permitted compost facilities, or they'll take it to an anaerobic digester, which is basically this giant metal stomach. And it's just like your stomach. It operates the same way. It digests the food, and the energy created is harnessed either through creating LP gas, which is later burned, or they'll have a generator on site which will burn the gas created and put electricity back into the grid. But that's not something that you would worry about. You would basically figure out, you would do your food waste audit, figure out, okay, how much material are we producing on an average day? How many of these bins do we need? And how often do we need someone like My Green Michigan to come pick it up? And what would that look like? Let's go to another slide. Yeah, okay, so this is the top of one of their bins, all right? And they do a really good job of putting this on there and say, okay, this is not trash, this is food scrap. Here's the things that can go in, here's the things that cannot. And one of the cool things, if you look on the bottom left there where it says certified compostable, there's a little symbol there from the Biodegradable Products Institute. You can actually buy lunch trays and cups and things like that are BPI certified in a commercial composting system, and those can go to an anaerobic digester, but usually an anaerobic digester or a compost facility. So the cool thing is you can work with them to assess what you've got, and you can make changes to where you can actually pay for this by maybe reducing dumpster pickup. So I know a lot of schools and businesses really that are getting their dumpster picked up twice a week. Well, if you figure out your recycling options and your food scrap options, maybe what you could actually do is reduce one dumpster tip if you don't need it, because a lot of times the thing's only, half full and you get charged for a full dumpster every time. You might actually be able to shift money around to where you could actually pay for this. So it's not necessarily going to save you money, but maybe it's not going to cost you any more. And I think I've got one more slide here, Tracy. Yeah. So this is just, and this is not My Green Michigan. I stole this one from the internet, but this is something of what it would look like through someone like My Green Michigan. I believe you may be able to get larger dumpsters if you really needed to, but hopefully you wouldn't need to because you've done your food waste audits. You've started reducing things on the front end, but maybe you do need 4 or 5 of these that get picked up once a week, twice a week, depending on the size of your school. And those liners that are in those are not actually plastic bags. Those are like made from like cornstarch, and those will break down in a composting system. So although you can handle your food waste at the school, the back end of it, when I'm talking about, composting, you can play around with it. But if you really want to make a difference of diverting away from landfills, a third-party hauler or a local composter is probably your best option. And I think with that, I'm done. I want to make sure, I think I'm a couple minutes early, which is good because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions because we've got more examples and we've got more stories, and I'm sure they're going to come up with the questions that folks are going to ask. So I'm done there, and thank you very much. I appreciate everyone attending.
Go ahead and turn my mic back on. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. And Tracy, both. That was really great. I'm just going to quickly go through a couple of things. We put some great resources in the chat. If you have really good resources that you use or that you're aware of around food waste and composting that you want to share with others, please feel free to put those in the chat during this section because I will share those out with the follow-up resources for the webinar. And you'll get all the links and things that Aaron and Tracy shared with you as well. A couple of things just to be aware of curriculum-wise, especially if you're going back to the classroom. We do have resources to help educate about these at our EGLE Classroom website under our waste management resources. There are some links and information there for you. As Aaron mentioned, EGLE's food waste and composting web pages are really wonderful, and I will put those in the chat in a minute, and it's on the screen here as well. If you want to learn more about the other environmental education resources, things you can use in your classroom, lesson plans you can use, you can check out some of these things on the screen here. We have a lending station. Wow, one of our models that you can borrow for your classroom focuses on waste management, specifically on landfills. So if you're talking about that side of things, helps people understand how a modern landfill works. We have a career series, a bunch of videos that show how what our staff do and what their job looks like and how they got to that job. So if you're trying to inspire your students to look at STEM careers and careers in the environment, we want you to understand what we do and hopefully try to help people get down that path. And our next career series video that's coming out later this month actually will feature Aaron. So you'll get to hear a little bit more about his story and how he got into composting. If you're interested in our curriculum, we are doing a couple of workshops for our MEECs, our Michigan Environmental Education Curriculum Support this year. And we have a very special opportunity where you can train on all of the MEECs units at once at DNR's Academy of Natural Resources this summer in July. So check that out. Registration's open for that. There are scholarships available for pretty much everybody. So I encourage you to look at that. And then I'm going to send you a ton of resources in the follow-up. So I didn't put everything on the slide here, but some things just to really be aware of. When you go to that EGLE composting page, when you scroll down, there's a place to go to school resources. And that is just chock full of like really great resources for schools, both about implementing composting programs and food waste reduction, but also with lessons and things activities you can do with students in the classroom. I put in the chat earlier, but last year our webinar for students on Earth Day was specifically focused on different ways to address climate change. And we have a neat presentation where Aaron broke down that food waste recovery or the sustainable food management hierarchy. And what all those different pieces of that upside down pyramid look like. It's really good. It's about a 10-minute presentation, something that if you ever wanted to show that to your students, that starts about 18 minutes in, and I dropped the link in the chat and you'll get that in the resources as well. And then just to mention again, like I also said in the chat earlier, EPA does have a really detailed step-by-step guide to doing food waste audits in school. So if that's something that you're interested in and you feel like I took notes, but I didn't get it all down, EPA provides a really, really good, thorough resource for that. And you can reach out and ask us questions too on how to do that. Just a little snapshot of that food waste prevention website that Tracy mentioned, the Food Waste Prevention Week. They have another suite of really great resources. This is not clickable. That's just, I wanted you to see. There's lots of really good stuff that's available on there, and you'll get access to all of that after the webinar as well. And then I just really encourage you to sign up for our upcoming EnviroSchool events. We have one more this academic year in May, where we're going to talk about air quality and how to understand what we do to monitor air quality and to protect human health, particularly, and then also the environment with air quality, air emissions in the state. That one's going to be really, really great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now to turn on the Q&A time. And I just want you to know, if you're watching this later and you're sad that you're not going to hear the Q&A, we are going to collate all the resources that we talk about, and they'll be in the supporting documents available on the EGLE Classroom website. So if you're watching the recording and you're missing out on the Q&A, you'll still get all that great information.